All right, it's 6:30. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the City Council regular meeting for Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019 to order. Madam City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Christy Malchow.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Karen Moran.
Present.
Hornish.
Present.
Councilmember Jason Ritchie.
Here.
Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart. Here. Councilmember Romero Valderrama.
Present.
Madam City Clerk, we do have a quorum. Councilmember Ross, would you say the Pledge of Allegiance for us, please? Thank you.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, to entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councilmember Ross.
Yes, I'd like to make amendment. What number is the only topic on other than executive session?
11?
11.
I'm sorry, we're doing what
What
to
about it?
11?
I'd like to table that and bring it back in a,
Can you tell us what item 11 is? I'm sorry.
Item 11.
Political positions and non-core city-related discussions.
yeah, I'd like to table it and defer it for later study session for more collaborative working on that one. item.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Motions to table are not debatable. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we'll table that. Okay, so now we have to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, the agenda is approved as amended. Next, we'll have public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council, 3-minute limit per person or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. If you would like to show a video or PowerPoint, it must be submitted by 5 p.m. end of business day to the city clerk, Melanie Anderson at manderson@sammamish.us. Please be aware council meetings are videotaped and available to the public. Okay, our first speaker, Roisin O'Farrell.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to thank City Council for proclaiming today World Autism Awareness Day in Sammamish. I would like to thank Mayor Malchow for her continued support on this issue for the last number of years. It's very much appreciated, Christy. Thank you. I'd also like to thank City staff for going to particular trouble to ensuring that the lights are blue tonight. And I know that is not a straightforward thing anymore, just switching out a light bulb and putting another one in. Everything is LED and high tech, so they went to a lot of trouble today to ensure City Hall would be lighted blue. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, Melanie and staff. Thank you. So just to put this into context, to let you know what these small gestures mean on kind of a global scale. So today, the United Nations, as part of the Secretary General's strategy on new technologies, the UN will focus on leveraging the use of assisted technologies for persons with autism as a tool in removing barriers to their social, economic, and political participation in society. They discussed today with experts and self-advocates with autism. They discussed things like the internet and digital communities, independent living using such things as smart home technologies, education and employment, tech medicine such as opening the doors to healthcare, and the right to be heard, political participation and advocacy. So all these small things that we do on a local level all matter. And they matter because they permeate through society and they permeate upwards. So I want to thank you for this small gesture, which means a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mary Wichter.
Hello, my name's Mary Wichter. I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish. So yesterday at the council meeting where we're not allowed to talk, I had handed out a handout with the city's street maps. And it's the same street map, but it just has the aerial overlay so you can kind of see how development looks. And I'd asked you to do some homework. Probably you didn't have time, but we need to do some study to learn things, so I'm asking you to try to figure out where the public streets are and the private streets. And on the street map, The legend here says gray is public roads, and kind of a brown reddish color is the private roads. So what I wanted you to do is look for clusters where private roads are. I don't mean like a spaghetti street that looks like this that's just kind of one way in and way out. I mean a cluster, because that's where development would have occurred and impact multiple people. So I also just passed out at the beginning of the meeting, I passed out what I'll call the answer key for homework. And I didn't expect you to do the dates, but it's very important that you look at this because people fear, oh, private areas, if we have to do something, we have to do the whole city. And the answer is public streets are about 205 miles in the whole city. Private streets are only about, it says 37, let's just call it 40. So it's 40 miles worth of streets out of 205. It's about 18, 19, let's just call it 20%. Okay, and then I wanted to show you where those are grouped. So if you look on your map up the left slope, which is the steep slope area where the critical areas are, you really don't, well, you see Providence Point, but that doesn't count because it's in Issaquah. And then you really don't see anything until you get to this kind of long, kind of dagger-shaped thing, and that's Tamarack. That was an assessor's plat in 1964. They wanted to get tax revenue. And then just above that is the Inglewood, which used to be a town. That was platted in 1889, and the lots are super small, way smaller than their zoning permits. And then the next one is Sahalee. You know that is the exclusive gated private community with a golf course. And then if you look at any of the other ones on the right side where it's up on the plateau and it's pretty flat, all of those are condos or houses, and those were built in right across from Safeway, 1999, 1998. Over here, just across from the Commons, if you go out, that was built in 2000. There are two little areas in Klahanie. Those are condos. I looked them up today. They're 1989, 1988. So the reason that these dates are important is in all the stormwater, I've been doing this for 4 years, the city defined before I started speaking something called historic plats. Those are plats that occurred before 1977. And the reason that's important, so if you can look up here, subdivision code happened in 1935, but it didn't really happen until 1969. Inglewood was platted in 1889. Tamarack was platted in 1964. That was before subdivision code. King County didn't even come up with the idea for drainage until 1969, 70, 71. And that was just as recommendations and guidelines. 1977 was the first time they required drainage, and then flow control was required in 79. So everything that was built after this has drainage, and Tamarack doesn't, and you'll be hearing more about it because it's coming up on the 16th of April. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the public? Okay, seeing none. I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any changes? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, the consent calendar is passed. Next, we have a proclamation. This is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we have Mary Ellen Stone, who is the King County Sexual Assault Resource from the Resource Center, and she is also a Sammamish resident that is going to read for us this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Malchow, City Council members, staff. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, so let me read the proclamation, and then I also have some KSARG swag for you. Whereas Sexual Assault Awareness Month calls attention to the fact that sexual violence is widespread and impacts every person in this community, and whereas in Washington State, 45% of women and 22% of men report having experienced sexual violence in their lifetime, and whereas in King County, 6,657 adults and children received services from accredited community sexual assault programs just last year, and whereas nationally, 1 in 5 children under the age of 18 are sexually abused, and in King County last year, 2,000 children and youth who have been sexually abused received services from King County Sexual Assault Resource Center, and whereas in 2016, 18% of 10th graders in Washington reported they had been made to engage in unwanted kissing or sexual contact, and whereas negative impacts of sexual violence trauma on women, men, children, and youth include fear, concern for safety, symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, injury, and missed school or work, And whereas working together to educate our community about sexual violence, supporting survivors when they come forward, and speaking out against harmful attitudes and actions, and engaging in best practice sexual violence prevention helps end sexual violence. And now there be it resolved that Mayor Christy Malchow and the Sammamish City Council join advocates and communities across King County in taking action to prevent sexual violence by standing with survivors and proclaiming April 2019 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. There's never been a more important time to talk about this issue. You only have to read the news. You only have to listen to your constituents and talk to your friends and family. So thank you for proclaiming this. We ask that everybody be loud. We have buttons for you. Gives you some tips on how to talk about sexual assault. And thank you again for allowing us to speak out in this venue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Color choices.
Okay. Next, we have a presentation. This is on the Issaquah Falls City Road Design Project addendum to add a temporary roundabout and traffic control. Mr. City Manager.
I'm going to call on Mr. Zegers to present this item to you.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and fellow council members. I'm here to do a little presentation of some of the proposed traffic control items that we are going to do with the Issaquah Falls City project. Also prepare, because we're on the home stretch to start bidding this project. We just have a couple last-minute little things to do with the state to secure our grant funds. As soon as we get that done, we're going to start advertising this project. In the meantime, we have one last little design requirement that we want to get done for the project is to get an approval to do a contract supplement with our design consultant, Lochner, to prepare some bid documents for the temporary roundabout on Issaquah Beaver Lake, 256, and also a couple of little traffic control items we'll have on here to include those in the contract. We'll be doing that through an addendum while we're bidding. So just to show a little overview, obviously this is the phase one portion of the project from 242nd to Klahanie. And included is the traffic control and congestion that we had a workshop earlier. Also had a lot of concern from the neighbors and the residents in Klahanie as well as council members. So that was a little addition that we did to the contract to take this into account. As part of the traffic detour measures, the main route that we're going to be using will be using Issaquah Falls City throughout most of the project. It's an existing 2-lane roadway now. We are widening to 4. The plan is for most of the project to keep that road open for traffic while we do the widening. The only time we will have to detour traffic to a different route will be when we construct the bridge over the creek crossing. At that time, the detour route will be Issaquah Beaver Lake over to Issaquah Pine Lake. And part of keeping or deterring traffic to go through Klahanie, we're going to be implementing some temporary traffic control measures and also including a roundabout at the 256 intersection of Issaquah Beaver Lake, which coincides to a concurrency intersection project as well. So we're just kind of jumping a little ahead, include the roundabout, and then later on we'll do a separate project to beautify, get the improvements that we'll need through observations, and finalize that roundabout. One of the locations is along Klahanie Boulevard in the park. We're going to be doing installing some curb extensions. It gives a visual necking of the roadway as we have on the northeast portion of the city. It helps deter people from speeding. Obviously, the Klahanie Boulevard is a wide road with parking on both sides. By giving those visual cues, it protects the the crosswalks, but it also helps deter those speeders or the inclination to speed. So we'll be implementing those throughout that boulevard. Another location, we'll be doing curb extensions, will be some of the intersections. One of them is at 244th in Klahanie. We recently just did some handicap ramps, so we'll be incorporating some bulb extensions on the other side to kind of give a necking of appearance at the intersection, which will help slow people down. Another location that we noticed was at 247th and 45th, just in we're going to be, this is more of the wider intersections, so we're looking at installing a temporary traffic circle. And again, rather than putting in stop control or slower measures, we're going to put these traffic circles in. Most likely, they'll just be attached. They're not going to be a permanent installation where we would remove paving, but those also help slow down people throughout these intersections, especially in the neighborhoods, to keep them down to those 25-mile-an-hour speeds. The last one is kind of the bigger improvement that we're going to be doing, which is what most of this design cost is for, is to get the plans to construct what we're calling a temporary roundabout, mainly because we are not getting all the landscaping, all the lighting, all the major improvements for this intersection, but we are going to install the island for a roundabout at the Issaquah Beaver Lake in 256. We don't need any right-of-way. We have plenty out there. The roundabout actually fits within all the existing asphalt that is out there. So it's just a matter of installing the curbs, the striping, delineations to get this in there. This is actually going to be installed prior to any of the road closures. So we're going to include this with the contract with our Issaquah Falls City. And then later on, as we observe the traffic through the detour route, we come in later to do the permanent features and the lighting and the beautification through a separate project. And in addition with our contract, and to these things that we're trying to get designed with our contract, with our design contract, we are also going to include in the bid proposals with our contractor an additional $50,000 line item to take account to any additional traffic control, temporary traffic control we will have to use during construction. So if we have to look at any additional signage or more roundabout, more islands or anything else we can do throughout the essentially 2-year project timeline for construction, we'll have a line item that we can tap into to install additional features as needed. So this is something that we'll be monitoring throughout the entire construction. Emphasis obviously will be when we do the road closure. The next steps, actually in addition, we will be working with the police department as well. So we will request additional police presence to monitor speeding, looking at traffic patterns, and obviously detour speeding through Klahanie. And then lastly, we'll be working with the police and the fire department. We've been looking at putting a temporary station in the QFC shopping center throughout the closure. So we'll have a increased fire and safety presence to deal with that closure of the roadway. Our next steps, obviously, is bidding this project, going out for advertising. We're hoping within the next 2 weeks, all depending on what our response is from the state on our grant funding and securing that. As soon as we get notification, we're going to advertise and start bidding. We look to come back to council in May with a contract award. And then after that, we will have one more public hearing, a public meeting that we'll have with the public to kind of prep for construction, show what the detours, what the traffic control to expect, contacts with the contractor we will select, and obviously project management. So that is where we're at right now. Obviously, I'm asking to have council approve the additional design contract addendum so we can get these things designed and into the contract as soon as possible. And with that, I'll open up for any questions.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you. I'm supportive of what you're trying to do, but overarchingly, I'm concerned about the length of time you perceive Issaquah Falls City Road to be essentially closed for during how long, what's your anticipation? I know construction is, have a, it is what it is, but do you have a good guesstimate, or is that something you're leaving up to the contracting team to let you know?
Well, obviously, depend on the contracting team, and they ultimately will give us a construction schedule when they start the project. We're anticipating 6 to 8 months, and really that's just for the bridge construction itself. The rest of the project, the Issaquah Falls City will be open.
Okay, so regarding the closure time, and frankly, the backup and all that, it's going to be, I'm hoping that there'll be people utilizing the, it's going to be backed up quite a bit going up there while construction is going on for the period of time, even when the bridge part is, even when it's open, it's going to be kind of a mess. My hope is that part of the process, or something you may be able to include, and whether or not you need council approval for this, but I would hope that there could be some signage maybe further down Issaquah Falls City Road, letting folks know that those businesses are all still open at Klahanie Center. They are an island in and amongst themselves, and I would hope that we can let other people know that those businesses are available, they're open, and that turn left here to get there, they're open here, that kind of thing, just to make sure our businesses are represented in that process.
We'll be able to do that. We're going to be obviously notifying King County, probably most likely putting signs all the way down to the Issaquah Highway 202 in Doofy Hill. And then as we work up, closer to Klahanie, definitely making sure that the closure is notified to be after Klahanie so people can get into the shopping centers, and we'll say local business access is still open.
Thank you.
Andrew, I have one additional question. So the contract amendment here is fairly minimal, but it appears to all be engineering and design work. What is the cost of actually putting in the temporary roundabout?
Actually, this is Sam Park, our project manager for the project. He just is, he's been diligently working the DOT and getting those paperwork. So, Sam, do you think you can answer that one?
Yeah, I think we'll have to get back to you on that. It's broken into several different items in the estimate, so we'll have to just highlight the ones that concern only the temporary roundabout.
Okay. I mean, I certainly support doing this. I just was more curious than anything, since the contract amendment here is only for design and engineering work.
I think since we're trying to do it in a temporary nature, by putting it on top, of the existing asphalt without removals, we're utilizing a contractor that's going to be in the area. We do it, we say minimal. I mean, I ballpark figure, I can see 150 or less, 150,000 or less on something like this. What I've done in the past on things like this, it's essentially doweling in concrete curbs on top of the asphalt, and it is a minimal cost. It'll be more for traffic control, probably be the higher expense on something like this.
Okay. And was this cost embedded in our original overall? No. Okay. Sam,
The contingency amounts that we were using probably would have fallen within that.
Okay. All right. Very good. Councilmember Hornish.
Following up on that, I'm not sure where to start. In our agenda bill, there was a cover that says the original, and I just need a refresher, 1.6 million was the original contract for design, and then the current contract is 3.1. Refresh my memory how we got double?
So
Was that the bridge?
original.
I'm sorry, I'm answering my own question, but go ahead.
Just to answer that quick question, we'd had design changes throughout the project to include the bridge. We removed the culvert. Structural design, that was a large cost of it. Right-of-way costs, environmental, dealing with the Corps of Engineers, obviously going to a bridge, it's just a lot of additional design elements that have been vetted through the concept. I think when we started the project, we had minimal amount, and then as it grew, there were additional costs that were unanticipated that weren't in the original contract. Overall, we typically look at about a 10 to 15% average for design costs compared to the project. So if you take the construction costs, take 10 to 15%, that's usually what the design costs are, and we're right in that ballpark with this project.
So when you were saying 100 and 150 was for what,
That'd be
the
about
whole project, not just this roundabout?
The construction of just that roundabout is 150,000, something like that.
So,
This
yeah,
whole project, we're looking probably around 23 million.
Okay, I wanted to get a feel, but I'm a little confused now with 150 because in our agenda packet, the financial impact on the second page of the agenda bill, it says the total project construction estimate is 24 million with a total design cost of 3 million. Can you help me understand what that meant?
So the 3 million is our overall design contract cost for the entire project. So that's the water, that's going to be the roundabout, the bridge, the roadway, and this amount as well. So this 150, this extra 15,000 we're asking to give for the design of this little roundabout and these traffic controls is part of that 3 million. The 24, 25, that's overall project costs, including design, including right-of-way purchases, including permitting, and the construction of the project itself.
So how does that comport with the 150 that you're talking about now?
The 150 is just a little bit of the roundabout that's embedded into that 25 million. There's always a contingency amount.
Anybody else
in there.
understand that? I'm really still confused. Can somebody explain it to me?
You're asking what the 150 is a part
Yeah.
of? It's part of that overall $24 million to construct the Issaquah Falls City Road. So that it would include all of our detour routes and any mitigation, which this is part of the mitigation for detour routes.
That's what the construction estimate is the detour routes.
Right, so the 3 million is a part
the
of
cost
the
of doing that.
24
Okay,
million,
got it.
and the
Okay,
100.
that's helpful.
Yep,
That's what
okay.
I needed to understand. Thank you. Okay. I'll move to approve, actually, since my light.
Second.
Seconded, any discussion? Councilmember Ross? No? Okay. All right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we have a temporary roundabout coming our way.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So we removed item 11. So we are on to item 12, which is Councilmember Stewart's report. I don't think they need to read their entire report since it's in
No,
the
but the wrong
packet.
version of my report was published, so I have a couple of items that are not included in my report that I'd
So
like
I think it got republished unless there's additional stuff.
It
that's-
got republished with the wrong
okay.
version got republished, it
Okay.
looks like.
No
Alrighty.
holy
I was going to say
crap,
this was all in your previous report that you did, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
So
do you have,
I do have a
Okay.
current version. Well, so my first item in my report is about the draft environmental engineering study for the Vision 2050. And so I will send out the current version of my report to council, and I'll ask staff to publish it next week so that the public has it. But it's really important that I think that we take a position on this. The Vision 2050 document goes into a lot of detail about the projected growth for the region between now and 2050. And in that document, what they're asking for input on is which method of growth management should the region take? And there are three main options. There's an option that says stay the course of how we've been managing it up until now. There's an option that talks about basically trying to configure the growth more around transit hubs, and then there's one that basically talks about spreading it out a little bit more. There's a lot of detail.
there's a third one though too, right?
That was the three.
Okay, I didn't hear the do nothing one, sorry.
To stay the course.
Okay.
So there are three options. We can also provide feedback that could be a hybrid option. The reason I think it's really important for us as a community and for the public, they can also provide feedback, and I will see if we can get consensus to ask that we put that information on our website so that people can provide that feedback, is that what method and what options the region takes, the Growth Management Planning Board, what options they take will have impacts on our citizens. It will have an impact on our city, as well as anybody who drives anywhere outside of our city. So people who have to commute around the region. It'll have impacts. It will have impacts on how resources around the state will be allocated. So where transportation and other infrastructure spending will occur. So I think it's really important that we take a look at this. It's also critical that we look at the impact to the environment. So each one of those options talks about whether it has a more positive or more negative effect on the environment. All things that I think our citizens care deeply about. So my request to the city manager was that we put this on the agenda for a study session so we can get a little bit more information, because I didn't do it justice in describing it, get some input, and then see if we can formulate an opinion or some feedback that we would like to share with the Growth Management Planning Board. Other cities are doing that, and I think that if we don't, we'll miss an opportunity to have to help shape how that growth between now and 2050 is going to transpire. So.
Councilmember, are you done?
No.
Sorry.
So the other item that I wanted to bring up, I want to thank, there are some folks here in the audience who attended. We had our first annual Sammamish Sustainability Ambassador Summit. And this is, yes, that was put on by students. So there's a Sustainability Ambassadors program throughout the school district. The students who are Sammamish students put on a sustainability summit here in the city. There were a couple of students that were standout. They had a couple of projects. One of the projects was a student who put together curriculum to teach elementary school students and created a video game where they can learn about the environment. He pre-tested the students and asked them things like, do you know where electricity comes from? And then they played the game, and then he gave them the same test to see if they learned. And this is going to be rolled out to elementary schools in the area. The other student, she actually put together like a little starter kit on how to do bee gardens. You know, for most people realize that, you know, bees are struggling, and so she put this little kit together. She actually put together an app. It won first place from MIT for like the most innovative app. It's gotten over 1,000 downloads on the Google Store, and it's just this little kit so that people can do that, and schools around the country are now planting these bee gardens to help the bees. So, I mean, these are high school kids. They're amazing. So it was really great. We'll try to do more next time and do a better job of advertising it so that more people can come and participate, because if you ever need to be hopeful, come watch the kids, because they're just really incredible and amazing. We also had an event that was put on by the Sammamish Mosque and Platopians for Peace, where we had an interfaith event and dinner that was just incredibly moving, where everybody came together and we all just had a message of hope. It was, I guess it was in response to, is the best way to say it, to the unfortunate events that happened at Christchurch in New Zealand. But this was, again, an incredibly inspiring event where everyone came together, and we said, look, as human beings, we have way more in common than we have differences. We had people from, I think, every denomination of religion that is represented here in the city. And it was, again, it was just a really inspiring event. People met each other, they made new friends. And hopefully we can start to do some of these events just because we want to get to know our neighbors, and it doesn't have to be in response to something tragic happening. I also had in my report, we had our communications committee meeting, and I'll just let that come out in the report. We just started to put together sort of an agenda of items to work on for the Communications Committee. So sorry that the wrong version got republished there, but.
Councilmember Ross.
Just a quick question on the GMPB. I think it's excellent that we put our input, but structurally, did I understand it that we're not a direct member, but the Sound Cities, as part of Sound Cities, How do we get our
So
input?
I'll take that. I got it. So yes, we could provide our input through Sound Cities, and for something like this, that is typically how that would happen. But because there is such a diversity of opinion from the varying cities, that Sound Cities won't take a position if it's going to be contradictory to some of its member cities. And so what is happening is through Sound Cities Association and also through the GMPC, because through the GMPC they wanted to put together a letter. The GMPC, I'm on the, for King County, wanted to have a letter because they felt like if we could get all of King County to put in information or put in an opinion, it would have a bigger voice. But again, there's not a consensus. And so there's probably not going to be anything from Sound Cities or from the or from GMPC, King County. So each city individually is going to share their opinion, which is why I'm recommending that we put that together. And even if we do within the GMPC find we have a consensus, we'll only know that when we know what the position of each individual member city is. I don't suspect we will get a consensus there because there are going to be some cities within King County that want more growth and others that want less, and they may want to figure out how to trigger that growth in different ways. But I think we have to have an opinion on that to take it forward to know if we have a consensus or not, and then if we don't, we can submit that directly to the planning board.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So I want to further comment because it's important to note that GMPC is just one element reporting up to PSRC, which is ultimately the governing body that is in charge of Vision 2050. So we can also provide direct feedback to PSRC.
That's what the GMPB, I'm sorry, that's what I'm recommending is that we provide that directly to the Growth Management Planning Board.
Right, but we can also provide directly to the PSRC. So if you're looking to give the feedback, it's on the PSRC website. I do sit on that executive board for PSRC as well, and we have talked about it extensively there. But I'll send out the link to the PSRC because we can individually comment, and so can our public through the PSRC's
Right, but again,
website.
having a city position, I think, is going to outweigh
I understand. I'm not
individuals.
arguing with you on that point. I'm just saying the direct path to is through PSRC, since they are the ones that are executing the plan itself, and they will ultimately make the decision on whether it's stay the course, transit-focused growth, or reset urban growth.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Ritchie.
So, not quite sure what all that was, but I think it's a good idea that we actually try to do a study session. And I think we should at least have a discussion or maybe even a motion to ask our city manager to put some room in the agenda at an upcoming study session, whether we come to a consensus or not. We are all in the city, we are subject to the PSRC. And to not have any discussion about it, I think would be a mistake. To not have a consensus, I think we're pretty good at not coming to a consensus, right? So I think we could come to maybe some understanding, some better understanding, and I think anytime we can have a conversation as a council with our citizens to talk about what the impact of the PSRC numbers do to our growth and what we're going to have to do or not. So I'll make a motion that we ask the city manager to find time in the upcoming schedule, upcoming study sessions before April 29th, that we have a study session on this.
Out of here.
Yes.
I know, he's out the door, yeah.
Your last hurrah, Larry.
Well, April 29th is the deadline. So the motion is that we have a study session, or within one of our upcoming study sessions, that we schedule some time to review this topic.
I'd second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Looks like there's still further discussion going on here. Councilmember Valderrama.
No, I've got to go back to the earlier point. I still got to go back to
All right.
the question of GMPC. So,
Okay.
so can I ask that question now before I go, or do you want to go through this round? And
No, go ahead. If you're going to ask a question,
Well, I was just going to ask the questions, and I guess it's somewhat related. Is the current idea that we are going to present, in addition to a position as individuals, the city position through GMPC and rolling up, or are we going to do GMPC and PSRC as a city?
I think we can do both if we want to.
Okay, so
And again, the city position would actually go directly to the GMPB, so the Growth Management Planning Board, because GMPC is likely not going to have a consensus opinion. So it has to go directly to the Growth Management Planning Board, which is the body that will ultimately decide on what the growth strategy is for Vision 2050.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hornish.
I guess I'm in favor of doing one, but I'd like to keep it limited, because if SCA can't come to a consensus, I don't know why the heck we think we will. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time.
No, I would concur that as a single study session is ample time. I think if the PSRC website breaks down those three options in a very, very concise manner, I understand there's nuances to it, but I think we can probably get to some kind of place within a study session. Councilmember Stewart.
I agree, a single study session, and then put it on the agenda for the following meeting because we'll need to vote to get a consensus opinion. And when I say consensus, honestly, I know that we as a body don't tend to agree very often, if ever, but I think that this is so important that whatever we get 4 votes on needs to move forward. The city of Sammamish needs to have a voice here. It is just, it's just that critical. We have to come together. This is something that's going to guide the growth for at least 10 years until the next document comes out and we potentially make course corrections. And again, this is going to impact where they're going to target growth, and that's going to impact where dollars are going to be spent. And this is going to have impacts to every person who lives in the city, to their lives. So I think as a city council, it is our job to put together an opinion and move it forward, even if it's a 4-3 split. And there's a good chance I'll be on the losing end of that. It doesn't matter. We as a city need to get that, and we need to get it on the agenda for a study session and for a regular meeting so that we can encourage the public to provide input to us after our study session, and hopefully we can have a study session and have some draft ideas so we can get feedback from the public. I think it's just that critical. This is one of those big things that we all just need to work on. So it doesn't have to be a lengthy discussion at the next meeting, but it needs to be something we vote on to move forward.
Okay, well, let's vote on it to see if we're going to talk about it. Okay, all those in favor of adding a study session to look at the draft EIS and the 3 options, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, our astute interim city manager will find a place for it prior to that April deadline.
It'll be on the next week's study session, and then you'll see it on the agenda the 16th.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the other council report we have listed here is Councilmember Valderrama.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it short. First of all, as far as the 2050 PSRC, there has been a citizens meeting that took place a couple of weeks ago at the Citizens for Sammamish. They met on PSRC. They had a number of presentations. I believe it's going to take place again at their next meeting. They're going to continue those. We did have some members of the Planning Commission that also attended that meeting that gave some input as far as the housing strategies and how those all fit together to the comp plans and to what's taking place there. I wanted to second what Councilmember Stewart said about the event at the mosque following the New Zealand. It was a great event. Only problem I would suggest is not doing them on Fridays at Lent time, because we couldn't taste all the good food as the priests were going around reminding everybody that it was Lent.
No meat.
And so
No
we
meat.
had to limit our palate on it. So for the record, next time it's bad when your Padre's looking at you.
Well, and you don't want to have to go after Sam again, right?
That's right. That's right. So, and then the third item that I have here on my report is the Legislative Committee had met, and we had met on the 20th, if I'm correct again, 20th of March, during which we got that update of the first pass of the bills that were going out there. They're listed in the report. As you can see, the only 2 I will bring to our attention are the culverts that were our top priority. Currently, they are on both bills, so we're waiting for the reconciliation, but both of our culverts that we had asked for are currently looking to be funded. Fingers crossed. There was also questions about, significant questions on the density bills. There are 2 density bills. We called with Mike Suggs yesterday, the lobbyist. It's still going forward, both of them. One of them, the House bill, has an optional element for the cities to comply. The Senate bill is not optional, is what we're told, and we'll see how that reconciliation goes between the 2 of them for that. So that's for the legislative. Additionally, coming out of it, as you have on your agenda items, there were 2 items related to bills being mentioned there. Senate Bill 5323 on the plastic bags. One was the request for a study session to be held by the council at its convenience and the city manager's determination. That went forward for the council's consideration 3-0 by the legislative committee comprised of myself as chair, Pam Stewart, and council member Ritchie. There was a second request that was brought forward, a motion made on support of the proclamation of Senate Bill 5323. That comes forward 2-1 with council members Ritchie and Stewart supporting and myself opposing that. And I bring that to your attention as well.
Okay, I think we got to go backwards. We got a question down at the end of the dais. Councilmember Hornish.
I was going to move that we table any discussion about the proclamation that's being proposed.
Councilmember Roth.
You got to push a button.
He's turning on his microphone.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
Well, in light of the removal of, I guess it was number 11, whatever it was, I would second that.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
No, there is no discussion for a move to table.
Oh, you're right. Okay. All those in favor of tabling the discussion, I'm assuming on Senate Bill 5323?
Yes.
Okay, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, by
Not for
a
the,
vote of 4-3, it has been tabled. I do have an additional question for Councilmember Valderrama on his report.
yes.
And it's relative to the grants. We had emailed about it, and I guess my question and/or concern, and whether or not the legislative committee has further discussed it, is relative to the allocation of funding potentially for George Davis Creek and Ebright Creek. And of course, we're having discussions internally about those and what we may or may not do and in which order we do them. It looks at this juncture like the legislature has put more funding towards Ebright Creek rather than George Davis.
On one of the bills.
On one of them,
to the
okay.
Senate. So ideally, we will get them both fully funded out of the Senate. I know that our legislators are pushing for full funding, so out of, hopefully out of the reconciliation will come out ahead, but we'll have to see how that goes.
Okay, I just keep us posted on that, not that you wouldn't, but I think it's, obviously integral to the conversations that we're having relative to which of those project goes first and whether or not we move funding from one project to the other.
We can move funding.
Right.
They can't.
No, I understand that, but that could, change how we are able to do a project then,
No, understand.
depending on
but
funding.
Those were our priorities and
Yep.
we're acting on them.
Yep. No, I don't disagree that there are priorities. I'm just curious of how the inner workings of that funding will work with,
With the reconciliation.
with the projects and in which order we go in.
We should have a good idea by this Friday.
Okay, good. Deputy Mayor Moran.
In light of what's going on with different things coming from committee, and whether or not that because some of the stuff did not have support to get to the agenda, I'd like to add to the political positions and non-core city-related. I think we should add on there the discussion of whether or not we should even be having committees.
Sorry, that item was tabled, so I'm not sure we can add anything to it, can we?
Well, I mean, I think that should be added to that discussion when it happens.
Okay, Councilmember Valderrama?
Yeah, I think we can have that discussion, but I think before we have that discussion, it behooves the council to go back and see what happened when we didn't have committees. It became a disaster, and they forced council members were then obliged that everyone had to serve on a committee because it had gotten so bad, the situation. And so the history of it is not pretty when you don't have committees working.
Councilmember Valderrama, you still have your light on. Number one's going on here. It's the light hook. There we go. Okay. Councilmember Ritchie.
Okay, so unless I'm mistaken, and I've asked for council members' guidance on this, there are several different ways to bring forth an item to put it on the agenda. You can introduce something via email or conversation and seek 2 other people, so a total of 3 council members in support of a resolution or proclamation or motion or whatever gets it on the agenda. That's one. The mayor, and the mayor's role is that he or she in that role can add something into the agenda unilaterally. And the other way to do it that I understand is that if something passes out of a committee, it is put onto the agenda as well. Is that inaccurate?
I don't have our council rules in front of me today.
That is how I understand our council rules.
Can I ask the city attorney's legal opinion on that? Does anybody know?
It's in black and white in the council rule. Yes.
Okay. So before we,
Wait. Can I answer? Because I don't think it says in the rules that it can come, if it comes from committee, that it has to go on the agenda. We'll have to check.
okay. So I would suggest before we, I think that's pretty salient information as far as, what we've been
Well,
doing.
especially if it's a 2-to-1 vote.
I'm sorry?
Especially if it comes out of committee at a 2-to-1 vote.
It passed out of committee, whether
Okay,
it's
let's not have a conversation up at the dais.
Okay, so
Councilmember Ritchie has the floor.
Yeah, thanks. So I think it's important that before we start talking about, what's going to be part of Councilmember Ross's tabled motion at a study session, and that we should try to figure out where we are as far as what our rules are. And I had an understanding, Councilmember Hornish has a different understanding. That's cool. I'm not judging it. We were acting, or at least this council member was acting under what I perceive to be the existing rules. If we want to change the rules, let's change the rules. But before we figure out what we're going to change, we should probably figure out where we are and have all 7 of us get that on the same page. So I would ask that we direct the city manager and through the city attorney to present us with what exactly are our current rules, our current body rules as far as putting something on the agenda, so that we can at least start from the same page.
I think those are in our council rules, and those are online, so
Okay.
we can pull those right off of our
Let's do
website and read them if need be. Deputy Mayor Moran?
I was just calling primarily, and I wasn't pointing fingers saying anybody was doing anything wrong. It just appears that we are continually having some committees that are having problems, or we're having problems when stuff gets to the dais. So I was suggesting that we review some of the committees, and maybe we keep some, maybe we don't. But I think that we should have a review of the committees.
Councilmember Hornish?
Actually, I just so happen to have a copy of the rules. An item can be placed, or the city manager, I'll paraphrase, prepare a preliminary agenda specifying in time and place, subject to review by the proceeding officer. Number 2, may be placed by a majority vote or consensus by the mayor or deputy mayor in the absence of the mayor, by the city manager, or any 3 council members. Number 3 can be on the preliminary agenda for regular business after the preliminary is finalized, only if a council member or the city manager explains the necessity for placing the item on the agenda and receives a majority vote of the council to do so. Number 4, legal required public hearings, priority have over other agenda items. Okay, that's no big deal. Agenda items that are number 5, agenda items that are continued from one meeting to another will have preference. Number 6, it's the intent of city council that council procedures be periodically reviewed as needed. There's nothing in there about coming out of committee.
So
Councilmember Ritchie?
So what I'm confused by then is it is not on the agenda currently under new business. It came out of the committee as part of Councilmember Valderrama's report. So, I mean, I heard Councilmember Valderrama's report. I was in the meeting. I heard what he said. I think he reflected what happened accurately. So that draft proclamation then cannot be moved out of the councilmember report to be acted on based upon that reading of the rules? Is that accurate?
I'd still like us to get a full-on review
Hold
of the
on,
rules,
the council will
please.
be recognized before I was looking down at the city attorney here. I don't know if you want to comment on what Councilmember Ritchie was asking.
I think I have a couple of perhaps conflicting answers. Number 1, as I recall Tom's recitation of the rules, I don't think it could come out based on that, but I don't have a copy of that in front of me. I think more fundamentally, though, Council, when the 7 of you are here at a meeting and someone wants to make a motion to take something up, then it's at least consistent with a portion of the council rules that if there's a majority vote to take it up, you can take it up. You can always suspend your rules, and a majority vote is always a suspension of the rules in that case because you have a majority. So.
Okay, so I'm a little confused on the lights here because I have Councilmember Hornish on first. Councilmember Stewart, did you take your light off and put it back on, or no?
I don't.
I thought you were first, but then.
Fine, I don't care.
Okay, Councilmember Hornish.
Actually, I concur with the city attorney. I mean, I think it's pretty clear with what we have. If somebody wants to bring a motion, but it's tabled at this point for this particular motion, but you cannot go through a committee and get a 2-to-1 vote to bring it to the agenda.
Councilmembers.
And wait a minute. I'm sorry. Can I continue real quick? And I think we need to really focus on process and procedure here as a council, as a body. We have rules for a purpose, to get the city's business done, and it's a body that is acting. It's not 7 individuals. It is a body, and we have to have that process and procedure as a body and follow that process and procedure if we're going to get the city's business done in a way that actually moves the city forward instead of trying to take personal views and putting them forth and espouse with what you want to do or one of us want to do versus what we should be doing as a council body.
Councilmember Stewart.
Well, I completely agree with you, and we had a discussion in a committee meeting, and we brought topics forward. In this particular case, supporting a plastic bag ban, that is a sentiment that we have received from the community to the point where
I believe we've tabled that whole concept, right?
That's true, we have.
I'm talking about process. And I believe I have the floor. Thank you, Councilmember Hornish.
You have the floor as long as you're not talking about
Council,
the plastic bag ban.
let's not argue up at the dais. Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor.
Please keep your comments concise and away from the plastic bag specifically if we can to avoid more arguing.
We have processes. I think we have a question out to the city attorney to come back to find out what the process is for items coming out of committee. I would like to give him a chance to go back and review the full set of rules and come back to us with an answer. I think that we need to understand, we've brought things forward from committees before. So are we saying that committees meet and then they don't bring anything forward to the council? So I'm all for reviewing our process, our rules and procedures, because the whole point of committees is that they have discussions, they take votes, and we bring things forward to do the business of the city. And on this particular topic that we're not going to talk about, it's actually on. It's something that the mayor actually said we might bring forward, and it's on our sort of to-be-scheduled agenda item. So this is not something new. This is something that came up. It's passing through the legislature. We take positions on items in the state legislature for or against all the time. We have the ability through Robert's Rules of Order to take a vote. And I think that it's really important that instead of arguing over what we're going to argue over, we bring points forward, we take a vote, and we move on. And when we get feedback from the community that they want us to take up an issue, we should have a venue to do that. And I agree, it shouldn't be about what one person wants. It should be about, we've got people asking for something, we bring it up, we take a vote, and we move on. And it's really not that hard.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Okay, so we've been around a couple times, so this will be the last thing I say about this. First off, I don't think it's appropriate that any one of us shouts down another one, and that none of us are the sergeant at arms of this committee except the chair, and she can gavel us down if we're speaking out of order. So I'd at least like to check that behavior. Secondly, in my opinion, the table is out of order because it's not a real motion according to the Councilmember Hornish's reading of the council rules. So if the table's out of order, then I guess I don't understand. It's not on the agenda. It's part of a report. So it would need to be brought out of the report and brought forth as an agenda item, reopening new business. I'm no,
Parliamentarian.
I'm not a parliamentarian, but I don't know one other way to do it. So if we're not going to have things come out of a council meeting or a committee meeting, 2-1, 3-0, whatever the majority is, and not have it be able to be brought up, before it's even on the agenda, it's tabled. I mean, there was nothing on the agenda to table, so I think the table is out of order. So if we are going to follow process, then I would like to do it the right way. So I would like to, knowing that it's going to be tabled, I would like to take the motion that we have a draft proclamation in support of Senate Bill 5323 out of the committee and bring it out for discussion in front of the full council and by reopening new business.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Deputy Mayor Moran.
I'm not on that motion.
Okay, Councilmember Hornish.
I would ask for the mayor to rule as to whether it is out of order of the table.
Well, considering that we all took a vote on, I'm not a parliamentarian either, but because considering that it was moved to table this particular topic, I don't know that we can then pull it up and put it on a future agenda, because that's essentially what we'd be doing.
The very nature of a motion to table requires that it be brought back up, be put back on the table at a future point. And again, you know, Council, I know there are lots of things going on here in this discussion, but you know, I just encourage you to go ahead, as I think Tom said, get your business done. You know, for example, there was a motion made that passed just a few minutes ago that's also not on your agenda, and that was to set the study session to discuss the PSRC issues. So it's common. You do it all the time when a council member has an idea or a notion during a meeting to make a motion and move forward on it, or vote it down. But you get a vote and then be done.
So I think the complexity here is that prior to that motion being made, there was a motion to table the particular topic. So I'm assuming tabling it would be to table it to a future
a
meeting.
date certain in the future.
Yes,
correct.
so not this meeting. So I'm not sure that we can then bring up it again, because it's already been, I'll grant it, it's a little awkward that it was tabled before the motion ever came up, but it has been, and so I'm not sure it would be appropriate to bring it back up at this meeting, technically speaking.
It may not be appropriate, but the surest way to get a decision and move on is go ahead and vote on it.
So I'm going to turn it over to everyone else to vote on as to whether or not we are going to bring this up again.
It's a point of order. I mean, it's a point of order. I mean, is that motion that was tabled in order?
That is why I'm turning it over to the body to vote on. I am not ruling on it. I'm asking the body to vote on whether or not your motion basically is going to be allowed. So all those in favor of allowing the motion, considering the table earlier.
Well, hold on one second. I have a question for you. Do we have a precedent for this, or a precedent that's existed before we go out and create a new process? I'd rather see if there is either parliamentarian procedure or a precedent that you're aware of, because it seems like we're wrapping ourselves around the axle here, and I'd like to see if we can get some guidance on normal procedures on this.
I'm not aware of any, I can't recall something like this coming up before at a Sammamish council meeting or any other council meeting, frankly. I'm not a parliamentarian either, so I don't know if there's some nuance in Robert's rules on it or not.
It was Ann McFarland's suggestion, instead of having me rule on something, to turn it over to the body. That is what I'm attempting to do. So I'm asking the body, do you want to consider Councilmember Ritchie's?
Just as a point of information, just going back to what our sage council had said, since we've tabled it for a later day, where we're also going to be saying, if that later date that we're going to be talking about this is in the near future, and I think you were saying that we may have this discussion here in the next week or so, would that suffice to have both discussions at the same time?
Both discussions on?
Sorry?
My understanding that if you want to bring this back up, and I'll ask our attorney to correct me if I'm wrong, is that at your next regular meeting, you would make a motion to bring it off the table and schedule it for a work session. And that would take a majority vote to do that.
That's correct. So if that's the case, would we then just schedule it for, since it's tabled for the next meeting, and bring it for a vote? And that might give us a couple of days to think through this process. Would that suffice to Councilmember Ritchie and Stewart?
I'm not sure what you're asking, Councilmember Valdez.
Since currently it's being tabled under the original motion, legit or not legit or whatever, taking place. Next meeting, as our city manager said, it could be brought for the vote.
Okay.
Would that work on your schedule?
So if I can, that's a separate conversation. With all due respect, I don't think that's in order, from my perspective. I agree with you that there's a time and a place to bring this up. I think the motion at hand that the chair has asked us to consider is whether or not the procedure, more to Councilmember Hornish's point, are we going to follow procedure or not? If it was brought up out of Councilmember Valderrama's, your report, if it was brought up into new business, and if it was then voted to be tabled, we would then have another vote maybe or another consideration. We're tabling it until X study session, X meeting, whatever it is. I get that. But right now, I think the question that the chair is asking is, are we going to establish apparently a procedure that the city attorney has never heard of happening here or any other city council, where something can come out of a committee report and be tabled before it is even brought up into new business? That, to me, I think is what we're talking about at this point. So again, I would like to establish a process and not wrap ourselves around the axle of this any more than we already have. So I would like us to at least vote on that topic and then move forward as to
This is
whether or
on
not.
the process currently,
Yes,
not on
that's-
this specific issue.
Yes.
Okay, now can you state what we're voting on this process is?
Yeah, I will when we get back to it because I've got lights on. Councilmember Hornish.
I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart.
Well, I'm not sure I can speak because we're debating whether or not we're taking up the motion. So I want to speak to the motion. but-
Okay, well, we have.
Which motion?
We have got, first of all, we have to deal with whether or not your motion can go forward, considering it's already been tabled. I am turning it over to the body to vote on whether or not your motion can go forward. That is what we are voting on.
So I didn't think it was his specific motion. I thought it was the process.
Well,
Process
it
is- the
is,
motion
but
is
it's
the
a process. It's one and the same for the intended
I
purposes
think
of this
if I
vote.
can, the question is whether or not we can table a motion that has not come out of a council member's report. You brought out
No.
your report, and it's not in new business yet. So is the tabled motion, did we legitimately table it? Can you table a motion before it even comes out into become a motion new business? That's what I'm asking.
Okay, that's not what I'm asking the body. I'm asking the body, we have already taken a vote. It's done. We tabled it. The question now is whether you can bring it up even though it's already been tabled. I understand there's nuances and confusion surrounding whether or not it can be pulled out of a committee report to be tabled, but the fact of the matter is this argument didn't come up at the time that we took that vote. That vote has already been established. It is tabled. I see the city attorney nodding down at the end of the table. So
passed.
the question now is whether or not we can vote on a motion on something we've already tabled at this
May I
point.
speak to that?
And can we talk to that? Can we-
Mayor, may I ask a question?
Councilmember Stewart.
So with all due respect, we couldn't bring this discussion up with the motion to table because you can't discuss a motion to table. So I think it is important that we keep this focused on process. Do we want to allow council members, or do we want as a council body to table issues that haven't even come up yet? Because then we could take a vote to say, I want to table all future discussions of X. And I think that that's what we want to avoid. We want to make sure that we follow parliamentarian procedure, irrespective of any given particular issue. Because today it may be an issue that one person agrees with and a different person disagrees with, but tomorrow that could be different. And I think it's important that we focus on following parliamentarian process, allow motions to come forward, and we take an up or down vote and we move on. Because I'm pretty sure we could have been done with this vote in a lot less time than it's taken us to discuss the process.
City Manager.
Madam Mayor, members of council, I think what you're discussing here is whether or not you want a motion to bring this off the table. Since the motion to table it passed 4-3, I guess you could make that motion and see, but I think I could predict what that vote is probably going to be. But I think that's where you're at.
That would be clearer, that wording.
Councilmember Ross.
Well, we keep talking about process and precedent, and equally, what's troubling most about coming out of the committee in this instance is it's 2 votes. And we have, and right now, our council policy says 3 council members support it coming to the agenda. So does a committee 2 votes override the 3-vote requirement? So we're no matter what we do, we're crossing the hairs of process, and the only process in place that actually governs is the 3-vote rule. So that that in itself means it shouldn't be a element of discussion unless the majority brings it forward.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
Okay, we're just going to keep going in circles. So I'm just going to call for the question.
Second.
All right, I still have lights on, so we need a supermajority to just call the question. All those in favor of calling the question?
We're
Calling the
voting on
question.
Call the question? Or?
Because the question has been called, there are still lights on. I need 5 people to call the question and end debate to get this voted on. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we will keep debating. I think everyone whose light's on has already spoken once. I'm gonna say something, and I think the reason that Councilmember Ross brought forward the political positions was to avoid exactly what is going on this dais right now. We have spent, I don't know, a half an hour discussing this, and we're not getting the city's business done. I would suggest, first of all, this should not be a proclamation. When we take positions, they shouldn't be proclamations. My second suggestion is, let's just go about this in a procedural way that we know is not going to have adversity. Get 3 people to get it on the agenda, and we'll take care of it at the next meeting. I think that's the simplest way to do that. As far as procedure goes, I think maybe what we need to do is look at council rules about how motions are tabled. If we need to add something specific in there that it has to be on the agenda, so be it. But that will avoid this procedural nightmare that we are currently enduring and that our residents are watching on our behalf. So that would be my suggestion. On this, is let's take a look at procedure on tabling motions, add it to the council rules if we need to, and let's vote and move on here. Councilmember Stewart.
I'm just confused what we're trying to vote on. Are we still voting on the procedure, or are we talking about the motion?
We have to vote on whether or not we are going to, it's procedural based at this point. For all intents and purposes, this is procedural based. So we're talking about whether or not we're going to allow him to bring up something that's already been tabled. Whether or not the tabling was appropriate or not, that's a different discussion for a later date, in my opinion. Councilmember Ritchie.
Okay, so I agree with Mayor Malchow that we should look at our council rules. I think we should do that at our next study session to figure out what the right process is. And I will say that what I disagree with what was said is that this is in any way, form, shape, context, a political motion. Is it brought up in a way that got 3 votes? No. More to Councilmember Ross's point, should that be the case? I think we should sort that out. I think that's an important point in the process that we should sort out. But the word political has all kinds of pejorative terms or kind of connotations related around that term. So I would not think that this is so much of a political thing as much as anything else we've dealt with, and we are an elected body, so frankly everything's political. But this motion does, as others, they do with core functions of the city, and I think it's important that we not table it and blow it off. I think it's worthwhile talking about in a study session. So, is there a motion on the floor that we're voting on right now?
Yes, there is. It's whether or not we're going to allow anyone to bring up a motion that's already been tabled. So,
okay, so I would ask that we not vote on that at this point and just withdraw and step back and reserve this and direct our city manager to place this on agenda for a study session around other process conversations that we plan on having anyway. I don't think another vote is going to do us any good right now. I think we all pretty much have, myself included, talked this one to death.
I'm still trying to figure out whether or not procedurally we can do that considering the tabled motion.
He withdrew his motion.
Okay, but you just said you were moving to direct him to talk about this at a study session, correct?
What I don't understand then is that things get on the study session. Councilmember Ross's motion that was withdrawn and tabled is apparently now on the study session agenda. No. So it's not.
We tabled it, but we didn't table it to a specific date.
So, hey, go. Ready?
All right.
Friend, ready? Let's do this. I would like to make a motion that both Councilmember Ross's motion, number 11, that was tabled, and both motions that came out of the committee meeting are tabled today and brought up at our next study session.
That's what I even said.
Right. No second and it dies.
Okay, it has not been seconded. So I think we are done with this one. And because we're on council reports, I'm going to ask for anyone that didn't give a written report if they would like to give a regular report.
Yes, but I want to look at the city manager. Do I have the floor for?
Yes.
Council report, manager, council report? Are you going to talk about the meeting we had today concerning the why, or, okay, that's, okay. Councilmember Ross and I met today with representatives of the Y, still trying to drill down on understanding the finances, what's being done on the accounting side, where, what decisions were made to make reserves, what money is being earned interest on from the operations being paid to the Y coffers, and how they're calculating the reserves. And I think it boils down to that we have agreed to disagree in that context. And there does not appear to be anything in the agreement that addresses this issue, because it says, you know, we'll work and we'll do this and we'll set up these reserves. But what it doesn't say is how those reserves are established. And the way they did it is very different than how we believe it should be done. And I don't think we have a meeting of the minds with the Y as to how that they agree with us, and nor do we agree with them, so we have agreed to disagree. But there is a mechanism in the contract that if you have some disagreement or misunderstanding, and this is not really meant to be contentious, but there is an arbitrator, or did you have a chance to look at that, Mr. City Manager, as far as there's a third party that comes in and kind of arbitrates and kind of figures out what was meant, if the agreement doesn't specifically say what it should be, I think.
I haven't gone through it as of yet, but I'll have something for you by next meeting about how we proceed there.
Okay, so we'll take that up, I guess. So it's an update right now, and at some point we may need to take an action to send that to a third party in the future.
And you mentioned it wasn't adversarial, it was more an agreement to disagree. Yeah. And actually, the YMCA representative agreed that we should go to the arbitration, non-binding arbitration clause of the contract. So I think, for clarity, I don't have it in front of me. Do you have anybody have we should reference the section, I think it's 30-something in the YMCA contract that we should call the vote that we pursue non-binding arbitration.
I've got a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
Councilmember Stewart.
Before I could take a vote on anything, could we get a written report to explain in more detail what you're talking about? I think I understand what you're talking about, but I'm not totally sure, because you're talking about monies and going into reserves. Are we talking about taxpayer dollars? Are we talking about money from the city? Where's that money coming from? Can we get the text from the contract? I just don't feel like I have enough information to take a vote on something either way.
I'm not sure we want to vote right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can do a, what should we do? Bring it back, maybe partner.
Why don't we
with
table it?
Aaron?
No, sorry.
Yeah, motion to table.
Well, and I think we can give a report to Councilmember Stewart's point to help everybody else understand a little bit better.
We'll try to break it into
and then we'll report on the issues that we've been discussing and
we'll try to
what the different
distill it
views
into
are.
a short story.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, just following on Councilmember Stewart's questions on getting a little bit more detail on the membership, where the money's coming from. I'd also be interested to know what is the amount of money that we're talking about that's in dispute. I assume it's worth going to an arbitration and not a minimal one that we're going to spend more on arbitration.
It could be as much as $1 million a year.
Yeah.
or it could be half that, maybe. I mean, it all depends on what the reasonable mine is as far as what the expected maintenance is going to be on this facility over 25 years.
And again, is this taxpayer dollars or from the city money, or where's this money coming from?
It's operations, it's money coming from the WISE operations, but don't forget, we put $26 million in to build that facility. So it really is taxpayer money in my view.
Well, but this is money from their membership fees, correct?
Yes.
But,
Well, hold on,
yeah.
I still.
It's taxpayer dollars in question being reserved. So absolutely taxpayer money in question.
I don't know. I mean, we want them to do, and it sounds like it's not adversarial, which is good, so that we want to make sure they're adhering to the agreement. And what I just want to understand is, and I think what I'm hearing is that we would like them to keep more money in reserves than they currently. No.
No,
If it doesn't go into reserves.
I'll explain it in detail, but what they did is they took the current replacement value of the building, inflated it 2.5 years, or 2.5% over 25 years, which basically doubles it. So an $18 million replacement value of the building in 25 years becomes $35 million. They're reserving that per year on a 25-year basis. So they took 35 divided by 25, and that's what they're reserving, that they're going to have to replace this building over 25 years.
And it conflicts with the fact that they have insurance for the building.
Microphone.
It conflicts with the fact they're insured for the building, and they should have a asset replacement of asset air conditioning units, et cetera, throughout the life of the lease, and what is the amount you have to provision each year to fund it. Say it's a 10-year life for 10 years, it's $1 million a year that should be part of your reserve, just using simple math. If it's a 5-year asset for 5 years, it'll be much more, double that. But the point being is, we don't agree with the basis for the reserving for asset equipment replacement, and it doesn't, especially from my perspective, from an accounting perspective, it does not make, it's in conflict with normal accounting and reserving of your asset replacement costs. And so that's where one of the crux of the issues. The other is, if you want to talk about issues, I guess we'll do another issue is the $5 million contribution. They borrowed money and they're charging us back against our cash flow, a finance charge. Well, if you have $200,000 of finance charge, they only contributed $4,800,000
for the first year.
They have to figure out how to come up with $5 million, their contribution at times zero, not have us finance it, subsidize, and pay the carrying cost of them trying to borrow money with the home. So those are some of the types of issues that we're in sharp disagreement. And so,
well, I heard it was amicable. You have agreed to disagree.
We absolutely do, yeah.
But it's amicable, and so now we're going to go to the arbitration as the contract process is correct.
Right.
Okay.
And it's an honest disagreement. I don't think there's anything.
As long as it's an amicable disagreement, we could use some of those. Thanks.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, sorry, one other question. So if it's operations money, so it's membership money coming in, I get that you have some, depreciation rules, disagreements with them, but under any circumstance, would any of that money ever come directly to the city?
Yeah.
So there's something in the contract that says they pay us money?
Third tier reserved for joint decision on utilization of those funds.
Interesting. Okay. Yep. Yeah, I look forward to a detailed report. That would be very helpful. Thanks.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Are we done talking about the why?
I think so.
We're going to get a detailed report.
That's what I was hoping we would get, because, yeah, that's a whole lot of talk without a whole lot of documentation for us to review. But I appreciate you guys putting in time to meet with them, and I'd hope you would send that report to also, or the 5 rest of us. Yep. Thank you.
Yes. Does anyone else have a council report that was not included? Okay, I do. I had a meeting last week, I think on Friday, with Kat Sims from Master Builders. It was a good conversation. We talked a little bit about our development regulations, and I was able to express some of my concerns. I brought her a ton of pictures. She was going to share those with her members. I think we left with the agreement that we would try and do some bridge building between our community, because there is a distinct rift between what happens sometimes in developments with the community that they come adjacent to, and if they can understand why our community speaks out and in frustration both to staff as well as to council, and why we're doing what we're doing with the interim development regulations and then hopefully permanent development regulations, that maybe we can kind of have better development in the future where we're not having conflict between our residents and the infill development that we're currently seeing. So it was a good conversation, but that's it in a very succinct manner. Anyone else? Nope. All right. I think we have our city manager's report next.
I have nothing for you tonight.
Love it.
Don't we have a, do we need a
I
motion?
wouldn't dare tonight.
We have an executive session. What do we need?
Oh, we have to do that first? Okay.
Yes. So we have an executive session next. This is to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment pursuant to RCW 42.30.1G and property acquisition pursuant to RCW 42.30.110.1B. I have an hour listed here, but I suspect it will be less. Yes? Okay, we'll say 30 minutes. We do expect action.
Yeah, let's do 15. And we'll extend if we have to.
Okay, we do expect action. Okay, so we are now back in session. Do we have a motion?
I have a motion, Mayor. I move that we authorize the city manager to purchase portions of real property on parcels numbered 352900, tract in the amount of $101,640 plus associated closing costs. 222406-9071 in the amount of $50,650 plus associated closing costs. 222406-9080 and 22406-9094 in the amount of $67,130 plus associated closing costs. And 232-406-9007 and 142-406-9027 and 142-406-9095 and 142-406-9019 and 142-406-9013 in the amount of $52,000 plus associated closing costs for the purpose of Issaquah Falls City Road Phase 1 project road right-of-way.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
And if anyone
Any
asks me to
discussion?
repeat that, I refuse.
Is there any discussion?
Who'd vote?
No whereas?
Okay. Councilmember Valderrama?
No.
Oh, no, I have a next motion.
Okay. No. You don't need your light on to make a motion. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, those properties will be acquired. Or, yes. So, Councilmember Valderrama.
I
Go ahead.
too have a motion.
Great.
I move that we authorize the mayor to execute the contract with Rick Rudimenkin to be our next city manager.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we now have a new city manager.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we are adjourned.